Hi guys, and welcome to my showcase tutorial for fishing hotspots. So fishing hotspots is a plugin that spawns fishing locations around the ocean that players can, basically go and fish. So the way the plugin works is it'll maps out all of the locations, or suitable locations for the hotspots to spawn, and then periodically, which is all configurable, you can have it have it spawn the location, and the locations basically have different types of attributes which allow them to modify, the base version of fishing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn one of these. Usually they auto spawn, but and I've got the spawn rate set up to about about every sort of 1 to 2 minutes at the moment, so it's going to be spawning a lot of them, but it is configurable, and by default it'll be sort of once every couple of hours. And when they spawn, they'll last for quite some time as well. So when a new location spawns, you can see at the bottom left corner, it's spawned at 0:15. Let's have a look for 0:15. Mouse over it, you can see it's got some attributes there. So you've got line strength modifier, hook time modifier, yield modifier, XP modifier, and treasure modifier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to this location, and I'm going to grab a rifle as well. Now when I go over to this location here, you'll see a big dome. Disregard the one at the back, that's for another plugin. You'll see a big dome here, and in the dome you'll see a fishing platform. Now the fishing platform is just a JSON file which gets acquired from my Dropbox, and you'll notice this is also a safe zone, so you can't actually kill people in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these barbecues off. Now these barbecues don't require wood, they function without, so you can cook your fish here, and there's also some shops that you can sell your fish to, which is just those vanilla ones from the fishing village. And you can see at the top right corner we've also got the attributes. So the line strength modifier is 56%. Now line strength is basically how strong your rod is. So when you're struggling with a fish, it's how rickety and whatnot the fish gets. Basically how much you can pull without the rod snapping. The higher the value, the more strong your rod is. You can see I caught that shark without issue. The hook time modifier is how quickly you hook a fish, and you can see here I'm hooking very quickly as soon as I throw into the water. Like I just hooked on there, so it's acquiring the fish very quickly. You can see I'm fighting the fish, but my rod still isn't having any issues. I can catch it without issue. The yield modifier is how many I get. Now it's a percentage chance of an increase. So by default, I would have only received one trout. So what happens is it'll guarantee me the trout I'm meant to receive, and then every additional 100%, I'm guaranteed to get an additional fish. So you can see I've got 166% here, which means I'm guaranteed to get at least 2 fish. And then with the remaining 66%, it rolls a chance to acquire a third fish. Whereas if that was at 200%, I would guarantee to get 3 fish. So that's how the percentage there, the yield modifiers work with percentages. The XP modifier is basically an integration with skill tree. So whenever I catch a fish, you'll see I actually get XP. But the XP is more than I would normally get for fishing. So I've got 240 XP for that one. And then the last one is the treasure modifier, which is basically to do with the fishing treasure plugin, which is where you get caskets. That increases the chance of obtaining these caskets. It's not what you normally get. That was just modified for fun. So that's pretty much how the plugin works. Each location is going to have different stats. It rolls the stats randomly. You can disable certain types of stats entirely if you don't want them to be a thing. You can see, so if you don't want XP modifiers to be a thing, or fishing treasure modifiers, or even yield modifiers, you can adjust those values. You can set the high and the low value, so it'll roll a random number between those values. So if you don't want line strength to be ridiculously high, you can set it to be between, say, maybe 10 and 30% instead of 0 and 100. Same for the hook time modifier and the yield modifier. You can change those to your liking. And then players can then come and sell their fish for scrap. So a nice little way to make money. And then once the plugin unloads, or when after this platform here finishes, you can see in just a second, it's got 16 minutes left. So after this platform finishes, which I'll just despawn it with the plugin, it cleans up everything. So all gone. So that's really all there is to it. So the plugin, the hotspots can be called via a command, which is just spawn hotspot. You can see we've got one at C6 now. Go to C6. It's got line strength 68, hook time 59, modifier 158. And the XP modifier I've just kept flat at 100%, and treasure modifier, which is the config. So that's it from the in-game perspective, and these are just made with signs. So I'm sure players will graffiti the hell out of them, but yeah, these are just yeah, made from signs. They don't take any damage from things. So maybe the cargo ship. I'd say if cargo came along the path and hit it, it's probably going to break. But the hotspot should still exist. So players who are fishing here should still get all of the benefits. Yeah, cool. Anyway, so let's jump into the configuration side of things. Okay, so we're in the configuration. So we're going to go through the lines one by one and explain what each one does. So the hotspot settings is basically all the information around the hotspot attributes, as well as the despawn cycles and whatnot as well for the platforms. So how often should the hotspot spawn? So this is basically how many minutes should it spawn. By default, it's usually sort of 60 to 120. So it'll spawn every 1 to 2 hours, and this is in minutes as specified here. How large should the hotspot be, which is the radius. So from center to edge, this is how big it's going to be. It's going to vary in size. It's got a minimum and maximum value, whereas if you always wanted it to be the same value, you could set, you know, the minimum and maximum to the same amount. The hook time modifier is what's the minimum and maximum modifier for the hook time. This is basically how quickly it takes you to hook a fish onto your lure. So by default, it's always going to roll a minimum of at least 30%, but a maximum of 100%, which means as soon as your rod, you know, as your lure's flying through the air, you could potentially hook a fish straight away. So that's the default configs. Whereas if you wanted, you know, say 10% to 30%, you could do something like this, and that would cap it at 30% and roll a value between 10 and 30%. Rod tension modifier. This is increasing the strength of the fishing line. So this is that one where basically as you're reeling in fish, you have a less chance of breaking your line. So it gives you a lot more leniency. 1.0 basically means that the rod cannot break. So you just, yeah, basically just becomes a go fish game. Again, if you wanted to adjust the values, you could set that sort of 10 and say 0.5 or something like that. Fishing yield modifier. This is basically the percentage increase in fish that you receive. So as mentioned, 1.0 would represent a 100% increase, which means you'd be guaranteed at least an additional fish. 2.0 is 200%, which means you'd be getting at least 3 fish if you manage to roll successfully. But what's going to happen is it's going to pick a number between these two values. So if it hits 150, you're guaranteed to get 2 fish, and you have a 50% chance of getting a third. If it was set like this. The lifetime of hotspots in minutes, this is basically how long they last for. So, if we're going to be spawning every 60 minutes to 120 minutes, we want this to last for maybe 20 to 40 minutes, or whatever your server thinks, maybe 10 to 40 minutes. It rolls a random number. How dark should the spheres around the hotspot be? So basically, this is just the density of the darkness. So if you want it darker or brighter, it's just a matter of adjusting those values. So 8 seems to be pretty good for most plugins, but all it does is just simply spawns a new sphere over the top of each other, just to give that darkness. XP modifier for catching a fish requires skilltree.cs. Now this is the how much XP bonus the player will get while fishing in the hotspot zone. So it specifically requires skilltree, which is one of my other plugins. And this is the amount of XP that the player will get. So you can see I always got 100% XP increase from while I was in game and checking those other hotspots, because I have this set to the same value. Whereas if I wanted this to vary from say 25% to 125%, it'll roll a random value between those two numbers, and for each time the hotspot spawns. The fishing treasure modifier requires you to have the fishing treasure plugin, and that's the one that gives you those caskets, which can open up pretty much any item in the game. And this is just simply the modifier for how often you obtain them, and this affects the the base level chance. So with the plugin, the base level by default is like 2% per catch or 5% or whatever it is. So all this is doing is just simply increasing that value by this percentage. So if it's set to 100%, that 2% chance to obtain a casket then goes to 4%. If it's set to 200%, that 2% chance to obtain a casket goes to 6%, so on and so forth. The fishing platform settings. This is should we spawn a platform for players to fish off at the hotspot. This is responsible for spawning the platform. So I've just I've got my config settings in my server a little bit different to these, so hence why I was getting the platforms. Otherwise, it'll just spawn the dome. It won't spawn the platform. And despawn cycle per game tick. This is just how many entities are we going to kill each and every game tick when the fishing area is being decommissioned. There's not very many prefabs in the hotspots, so it's not really a big performance impact at all. Notifications. So should we send announcements via in-game chat when this happens, which I've got set to true by default, and then we have the GUI announcement stuff. So if I had GUI announcements on the plugin, we would get those GUI announcements coming up in game. So it supports that as well. And that's really all there is to it. Simple plugin, a lot of fun. Really, I imagine it's going to be quite successful, especially on a lot of PvE servers. So, and the safe zone should protect against things like, helicopter and everything else. So, yeah. Anyway, if you guys have any suggestions or any queries, concerns, get in touch. Otherwise, enjoy.